Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Sunday Night Live. My name's Dan, and I'm going to be leading you through this evening. Wherever you're tuning in from, why don't you comment below and let us know where you are. I am joined by some wonderful guests this evening that I'm going to introduce. But first thing to say is that we really want to create space to respond to what you're saying tonight. So put lots of comments on. If you think something's really funny, give us lots of emoji laughter. If you dislike something we say, then please turn off your phone. We don't want to hear from you. No, I'm only joking. But just comment, react. We want to be part of a conversation. Liam, Jan, why don't you come on and say hi to everyone?
Hello all. It's nice to be. This isn't how I exactly imagine my glorious return to H3O, but it's nice nonetheless.
It will be glorious, I promise. We're gonna work really hard to make it glorious, and that's basically on you because you're our brains for this evening, Liam. So we're really looking forward to you sharing with us tonight. And Jan, why don't you say hi and let us know where you are tonight?
Yeah, hi there. I'm in Adelaide at the moment, been here in quarantine for about 10 days now. So only 4 more to go and then I'll be allowed to hit the vineyards. So
Jan, we thought you might say, you're going to go to a park or go for a swim, but you're going straight to the vineyards.
Yeah, there's some nice ones around Adelaide. So yeah, that's where I'll go. Yeah.
Straight into it tonight. Wherever you're joining from, we just want to say hi. Say hi to the Saunders. Hello, Mel. Great to have you with us. Hello, Andrew Miller. I don't know if anyone knows who that is. And hi, Mum. She's arrived, so that's good. And who else we got? Rhonda. And we've actually got a whole group of people watching downstairs as well. So off the back of COVID-19, we've launched a Sunday evening gathering, which is really tiny at the moment. But we meet in my house, we eat together. And I'm eating some wonderful Lebanese food tonight because we thought every week we have a theme of our food. There we go. I'm just going to show that in our usual seamless way. Every week we have a theme with our food. And this week we went for Lebanese food in solidarity with our friends in Beirut who had that terrible explosion a few days ago. So our prayers are with them, and that may come up later. But wherever you're joining from, why don't you send us a message? Liam, you're up north somewhere, right? Can you explain to me, because I'm ignorant when it comes to the map. I don't exactly know where everything is.
Sure, yeah, north is correct. So I'm on Darkinjung country, and I'll pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging, which is also known as Tukli. So I'm kind of right up on the north end of the Central Coast. Tukli is a small little town near Wyong, which is probably a bit more known, or actually about 15 minutes further on than the entrance. Small beachside town, a fair bit of socioeconomic disadvantage, and but a really nice little area, a beautiful kind of natural part of the world. And I've been here since just the start of the year.
Yeah, wonderful, and we're so pleased to have you on. For those of you who have just joined us tonight, this is HCO Sunday Night Live. We're thinking all about curiosity tonight, and I'm joined by Jan and Liam. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Liam. Liam used to work for our church back in the day with Jamie and the team, and they did some amazing stuff. And then Liam became a Uniting Church minister and kind of went on that journey. He also has a great YouTube channel. He runs this podcast called Rinse, Love, Repeat. Did I get that right?
Love, rinse, repeat. But yeah. You had all the words.
And Liam's really good at his podcast because he researches his guests properly before they come on. But someone else, not so much. And then, yeah, it's really great. And if you look that up, so Love, Rinse, Repeat, just get that on the podcast. You can also see it on YouTube. Perhaps someone could put a link below, Andrew. Maybe you could do that just as you tune in. And it's really great stuff. But he's achieved all this amazing stuff, and I really like Liam. I've only met him a couple of times. He's a really good guy. But the most important thing about Liam is that he's Jan's son. The greatest achievement as far as HCO goes now. I know you were there in the old days and you did all this amazing stuff, but Jan is the boss, Liam. I don't know if you realise, but your mum has become an internet sensation over the last few months. So I don't know how you feel about that, but
I feel good. We kind of have shifted. I think when I was first kind of getting involved in the Uniting Church circles, I was always Jan Miller's son. And then as I kind of got more involved, mum started going to things where she was, oh, you're Liam Miller's mum. So I feel like that's probably why she switched denominations, so she could like stamp out her own identity again and
Exactly.
and find her own spaces. Yes, no, I'm more than happy to have that be my defining achievement.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a few people tuning in online, and they're loving all this stuff. Sue says that we're eating homemade tabbouleh. She just wanted me to highlight that it's homemade tabbouleh from Lebanon. And Lauren says, Liam, you're living in the shadow of a legend. So we'll stop all this stuff in a minute. But guys, thanks for your comments. Keep them coming in. It's great to hear from you. Jan, why don't you? I know Liam made references, but why don't you do our acknowledgement as we begin our time together more formally?
Yes, certainly. Okay, thanks. So we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we gather and worship today. They are stewards on behalf of our Almighty Creator, and we promise to walk softly and gently on these lands. We would also like to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jan. So if you've just joined us, this is Sunday Night Live, a relatively new outing for HVO, our church, where we gather a panel and we have a bit of a conversation, and we're joined by Liam. And tonight we're all about curiosity and learning. Curiosity and learning. And when I think about learning, I like to think about people that have inspired me, that have taught me stuff over the kind of course of my life. And so what I've asked the panel to do is to share a story of someone that's kind of inspired them, that's taught them something in their life, who they were and what it was that they taught them. And if we can stay away from like mother-daughter stuff, I think we kind of like did that to death. So obviously, Liam, we know your mum would be your first choice. No, it can be your mum, really. I'm really joking. But why don't we begin with you, Liam? Why don't you share with us? And if you're joining in at home, we really want to hear from you. Who's taught you something? What did they teach you, and who were they? Why don't you just comment below, and we'll read out some of those stories. So, Liam, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it was funny when I saw like a heads up. I did have a heads up of this question in advance, and like the first like 5 people that come into mind, like okay, mum, dad, Heather, my wife, our kids, like like they're the first that but I'm like okay, I got to get something more original than that. And this was the slightly more offbeat one, which was I have a memory of I was in like year 8 English at school, and we were reading Midsummer Night's Dream. I think that was the text we were studying. And for those who know Midsummer Night's Dream, toward the end of it, there's a play within a play where one of the actors is and because it's Shakespearean, they're all male actors playing all the parts, and I was playing the female role, and there's a lot of comedy around that in Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was hamming it up and playing it up, and it was going really well. And then I got self-conscious about doing that, like really like playing up, doing the female part and getting laugh, but like I'm still a teenage boy in year 8, so I get nervous, and so I stopped doing. Like I stopped giving it any energy and just start now playing it really like so the lines like this. Anyway, the teacher kicked me out of class. And then wouldn't let me come back unless I agreed to like still do it with the energy that I had been doing it. And I remember staying out for a while before eventually relenting. And then like, because I think the realization was that he was saying, this is going really well. We might perform it at some like assembly or something. And that's when I was like, no, I don't want to. But eventually I relented and like, I think it taught me a few different things. One was like about getting over being embarrassed about things that you shouldn't be embarrassed about, or letting those kind of fears of people small-minded responses get you down kind of thing, and just if you're enjoying doing something, which I clearly was, and it might even bring some joy to others, it's probably a good thing to keep doing it. I mean, it probably if I was watching it now, it probably wasn't funny what I was doing. But like, but from year 8's, 14-year-old comedic standpoint, I was probably half okay. But yeah, I think like it was just that like he wasn't just going to let me get away with just refusing to do it for no good reason, or just for the reason of like, oh, I might be embarrassed in front of other 14-year-olds. It was like, that's not a good enough reason. You were doing it. It was funny. It's what the piece demands. And yeah, and it just kind of stuck with me. And I think definitely shifted how I responded to it, how I then, like, as part of probably that process of me getting into acting, which people who know me was part of my journey. And I think that was, I just think it was bold of him to kick me out of class until I came back and did a comedy bit, and I respect it.
Yeah, that's great. I think well, that's a really helpful story, because it kind of frames some of the journey we're going to go on tonight when we think about this curiosity. And as we even look at the Bible story, like, which is about Jesus, like as a kind of teenager, probably about year 8, actually, like you probably would have been about that age, like 12, 13, that kind of age. So yeah, that's really great. If you've just joined us, we would love to know who's inspired you, what they taught you, and why. Why don't you comment below, and we'd love to hear your stories. And Jan, have you got one for us? Like, tell us about someone that's inspired you and why, and what it is they taught you.
Yeah, look, I found this quite tricky, really. I really did. I think for me, it was probably a sort of a notable time. Was not until I was probably in my 30s where I candidated for Minister of the Word, and in Melbourne, Ministry of the Deacon. And it was, you have to go through a period of time, and then you get accepted. And the whole time I was never sure, and I just always would think, well, if it happened, it happened, and then it did. And once I started studying, I think for me, it was just the different ways you could read the Bible. It was just amazing. So suddenly there was interpretation, and the lecturers there, it was just so open. And there was one or two candidates. There was one in particular I met who was pretty different to what I'd ever been sort of told. Like, she was gay, and she was a minister, and she had such fruit. And I think from then, with her ministry, and I just thought, well, there's so much I don't know and I don't understand. And so I had to, that was for me a big part.
Thanks, Jan. That's such a great story. And I think when you come across these people, and even these environments where your mind is opened up to just loads more stuff, like you thought that everything was kind of safe or one way, and then you enter an environment like that, like sometimes it's education, sometimes it's in other places, you're just blown. And I think that's kind of the space we want to sit in tonight. We've had a story that's come in online. Sue says her dad taught me to do all the traditionally, and she put that in inverted commas, male jobs around the house: mowing the lawn, changing a tire, digging out an above ground pool. I took away from those experiences that I can do anything myself. Now I hope I'm teaching my girls to do the same thing. So good. Thanks for that, Suze. My dad was really good at all practical things, so I never learned to do anything, and I regret it deeply. I just used to let him do it. So yours is much more virtuous, Suze, and I'm pleased if I need a tire changing, I know who to phone. So I'll go quick. When I was at Vicar College, or Vicar Factory as we used to call it, in the old days, in the old days, it's about 5 years ago, there was this lecturer who's an amazing man, Graham Tomlin. He's a bishop now. They made him a bishop, and he was like by a mile the smartest person in the college. Like, just a really nice guy. He had like he'd done his PhD at Oxford or Cambridge, one of them. Like, he'd just been doing it in the game for ages. He'd been a professor at Oxford. Not that this stuff's important, but he had all the credentials. You looked at his CV, it was immense. And he would never, ever, ever push that on people. He was the most humble guy. He would talk to anyone. It wasn't ever about like status or structure. And that's what kept me at that college. That's what kept me kind of in education. And I still really look up to this guy now. He makes these little videos on Facebook, like little sermons and stuff. And when we had this thing in England, Grenfell, which was a tower in southwest London. You probably picked it up here on the news. He was the bishop for that area and just did an amazing thing. Got his hands dirty, just got straight in amongst it, and was a chaplain to so many people. So he's someone outside of my family and all of that that's inspired me. So look him up. He's written a couple of books. Great, thanks, guys. If others have got stories, feel free to keep them coming in. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to move into the next section. We're going to look at a story from the Bible. The words in the Bible are immense. They're profound. They're also incredibly complicated. And when you think you completely understand what it's all about, a bit like Jan was alluding to earlier, it looks completely different. And when you think you understand one thing about God, it looks different. And that's the beauty of this book that we've got. And if you've never read the Bible before and you're interested in trying, please send us a message. I can help you with that. We can help you with that. But if you want to know where to start and you're a bit shy to send a message, these books called the Gospels in the middle, this book called Luke, you can just Google it, Luke's Gospel, and start reading. It's all about this person of Jesus. And today we pick up the story of Jesus in about year 8, as we said earlier, year 7 or 8, age 12 in the temple. And it's a really interesting story. We're going to read it in a few moments. And the reason it's an interesting story is we don't get much information about Jesus in the whole Bible, like growing up. So you hear a lot about his birth. You maybe did a nativity at school where you're all dressed up as kings and angels and all that stuff. And then we learn a lot about him from 30 to 33, which was his kind of ministry, from when it all started, when he was baptized, to his death. And we believe resurrection from the cross. But we don't know much about what happened in between. And today picks up that part of the story. So we'd love for you to join us. So if you want to read at home, it's Luke chapter 2, beginning at the 41st verse. And what we're going to do is something called Lectio Divina, which basically means divine or special or holy reading. We're going to invite you to comment, get your phones ready, with one word that jumps out at you from the text, or maybe a phrase. Now, normally you'd read this through 2 or 3 times, but we've learned our lesson on that with Sunday Night Live, that takes up most of the stream for the whole evening. So we're going to read it through once. We're going to say those words, invite you to read it again yourselves, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion about it as we think tonight about curiosity and learning. So Jan, why don't you read to us? Have you got it there? Don't worry if you haven't. You're on mute as well, so that was good. That was we didn't hear you swearing under your breath. It was all good, Jan. That was fine.
So sorry. Hang on. You did send me that.
Oh, don't worry at all. It's all good.
Okay. Have you got it, Liam? Hang on. I'll find it.
I have it if you want.
Okay. Hang on.
Oh, Liam, why don't you read it? And then
why doesn't he read it? Sorry, Dan. Sorry.
Don't worry at all, Jan. It's all good. You're wonderful.
All right, so Luke 2, 41 to 52. Now every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in a group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why are you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor.
Wonderful. Thanks, mate. That's so good. So I'm going to invite the panel to share what word jumped out at them in a few moments. But if you just joined us, we're doing this thing called Lectio Divina, just reading from Luke's Gospel, which is kind of in the last chunk of the Bible there. And these are the words of Jesus. And we just want to encourage people to write what words jumped out at them or what they sensed as they read the passage. So we've got a few coming in already, but I'm going to start. The phrase or word that jumped out to me was listening to them. Listening to them. Liam, why don't you tell us what jumped out at you?
Searching. searching for me.
Searching. And Jan, why don't you share what jumped out at you?
His mother treasured up all these things in her heart.
Wonderful. Well, we've got some words coming in from online. So Karen says, great anxiety. Lauren says, why have you treated us like this? Sue says, boy, Jesus. Rhonda says, obedience. And David says, my fathers. Rhonda says again, grew in wisdom. And Phil says, treasured. And I think one or two more comments will come in. But what I'd like to encourage you to do if you're reading at home is to read it through once more, to have a little glance over it. And you know what? Why don't we read it through once more? And this time, as I read it through, and we'll just do it twice through today. It's all live. We can change things as we go. It's all fine. There's no adults here to tell us what to do, Jan, are there? So we're all fine. I'm going to read it through once more, and I'd love people to comment and write what they think the passage might be saying to them. Whether you believe in God or not, we believe that these words are kind of alive and they continue to speak to us both today and spoke to people throughout generations. So I'm going to read the Bible passage now, which is taken from Luke's Gospel, chapter 2, verse 41 to 52. And then if you just write down below what you think might have jumped out at you. And if you just joined us, you're so welcome. It's great to have us live, and we're having a discussion about learning curiosity. Now, every year his parents went to Jerusalem to the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended, they started to return, but the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But his parents didn't know it. Assuming that he was in a group of travelers, they went on a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I would be in my father's house?" But they didn't understand what he had said to them. Then he went down with them to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. Amen. Amen. We've had a few more words come in from online. Amazed at his understanding. A day's journey. So different things are popping up. Keep the conversation going. What do you think this passage is saying to you? We're going to have a bit of a discussion as a panel, but we really want to hear from you. Sunday Night Live so much better when you comment below. So don't be shy. Feel free to jump on, or if you've got any questions for us about what's going on, Liam can answer them for us. So this passage, I'm going to ask our mother and son combo here and just live with that for a minute. Jan, if Liam went off for a day and you sort of lost him for a day when he was younger, how would that have gone down?
When I found him.
Yeah. Take us through the joy and then what you might say to him after that.
Yeah. Well, I think, you'd be, you can really identify with what they're saying. Look, we've been so worried. We've been looking for you. You really can hear those things that Mary is saying. And very much I would say that to Liam, and probably, get a bit, it depends. Like you try not to get angry, but because sometimes you were so worried, you can suddenly be a bit angry and because, you were so frightened, and then there's that relief, but so I think, probably would have been a few words said. I think Andrew would have said a bit too.
You'd have been good cop, bad cop situation.
Yeah, I'm always a good cop.
We're going to ask Liam a little bit about the context in a minute. So just prepare yourself, mate. But Sue says she can't imagine losing her child for 3 days in a crowd whilst traveling. I just think it's funny, you know, like Mary seems to have this interesting relationship with God. I mean, it was very interesting actually if you go back a few years. But like you can imagine her conversation with God, can't you? Like, I know they didn't have phones, but like, yeah, hi God, you know that son that I was supposed to bring up for you, like with the whole angel thing that was supposed to be the savior of the whole world. I kind of lost him. I'm really sorry. You know, it's not like God's going to send another one or anything like that. But I don't think it's that simple. When we see the kind of he was missing for a day and they all went off, it was different in that culture, right, Liam? I mean, can you speak into that at all?
Well, I think like, you know, yes, there's obviously a very different kind of communal culture with, you know, people being brought up kind of together in a much less, you know, nuclear family setting. So they've been traveling with a big group, and you would have easily assumed that, oh, he's with other boys his age, you know, and aunts, uncles, grandparents, just friends, people would be just keeping an eye. And also at that age, he's, you know, close to being considered, you know, a man to some extent, at least, you know, in some probably ways, there's a lot more independence probably afforded him than that age now.
Yeah, and that's so helpful. In one of the discussions I was in on about this morning, David Kenyon actually mentioned that. And of course, Mary was probably only 13 or 14 when she had him. So we're talking about a different culture and a different time. You know, it's still sad that they lost him for a day, but it's got a slightly different angle. The other thing that jumped out, and I was doing a bit of reading on this, was this idea of 3 days. And 3 is a significant number in the Bible, but also 3 days is a significant number because that's the time between Jesus' death on the cross and his resurrection as he appeared to different people in his new life, in his resurrected body. And it's interesting because I was doing some reading on it, and these stories, they reckon Luke has kind of deliberately laid it out like that, laid out his account to illustrate this point. And if you look at some of the Greek words towards the end there, like they actually use the same phrases and the same words as these two parents find Jesus and these two people discover Jesus. It's the same language, which I found really helpful. We'll chuck a PDF up on one of our groups if you're interested in reading more about that. But there's just so much going on here in this passage. Jan, do you want to just tell us? We've had a couple of comments come in, but we'd love to hear a little bit about what you think Jesus was doing in terms of like children, because I know you work with children, you're a bit of an expert. But before we get to that, Lauren says she can't imagine losing a child for 10 minutes, let alone 3 days. It would be torture. And then my mum says, I forget this story, but this did happen. I was devastated when I lost Dan for an hour or so in Barcelona. I was on the like the Ramblers, which is like the dodgy bit of Barcelona, and I think I'd wandered off. So I can relate to Jesus. But Jan, tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, you work with kids and you're amazing at not just working with them but allowing them to speak. Just speak into what you think was going on here.
Yeah, like I think I think I've done this story with children a few times with Godly Play and Jesus Lost and Found. And I think the fact that Jesus went off, I don't find children think that was necessarily a bad thing. I think they sort of get it, that he was in this place and that he was obviously interested in this place. And then some of them sort of, when you talk about the father, he says about the father, it's sort of, I think I think children don't think about the fact that people are anxious and worried, and from a parent's point of view, they are sort of thinking, yes, that's probably quite curious, that'd be quite interesting to see what that place was or hang around that place.
Yeah, it's so good. And we did a little experiment this morning because we've been gathering as house church during COVID-19 because it's a bit difficult for us to meet in a bigger group. And we did this little thing, which is something we used to do in England, which is hit, miss, or maybe. So do you like yes is hit, miss is no, I don't agree, and maybe is the answer. And we asked the question, and I was being slightly cheeky, and the question's very loaded, but I asked the children the question, Do you? Sorry, I asked everyone in the room the question. Do you think Jesus should have been punished for what he did? Which is quite a like Old Testament. Should he be punished? Like black and white. And so I knew I was being slightly cheeky, but it was really interesting, the responses. One of the adults said yes, he should be punished. The rest of the adults were maybe. Like, it's a bit more complicated than that. A bit like you said, Jan. On the one hand, you'd be really angry at Liam, right? Because you're like, I don't want to lose you, but that would come from a place of love. And your first response would be to embrace him. But what was really interesting was the kids didn't think he should be punished. All of them had their thumbs down. And I thought, isn't that insightful? And we can read into that like however we want. But from their perception, what Jesus was doing was an interesting thing. It was a curious thing. And tonight we're thinking about this theme of curiosity and learning. And it's just worth saying that if we really want to get this stuff, we can speak to experts like Liam and Jan, but really, like Jesus says, if we want to understand the kingdom of heaven, if we want to understand what it means to kind of glimpse this kingdom, to be part of this wonderful restoration of all things, we should first look at children. We should first look at children. And as I've become a parent, like I found that hugely challenging, like trying to see the world through Isla's eyes. So when she's walking along the road, like touching everything and wanting to experience everything, rather than rush her along, which I do most of the time, like trying to dwell in that moment and be in that space. We've had some comments that have come in online. Mel says, I felt like the Jesus-like thing would be for Jesus to have told his mum where he was. Well, there's a comment.
Yeah.
Do you want to respond to that, Liam?
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah. He was obedient after that point, which is a very loaded phrase in the reading. One thought I had, which was just interesting, is I think often we think of, there's that phrase where like everyone was amazed at Jesus's answers and so impressed with all what he was saying. And I think often we take a very initial reading of that as like, well, of course, the reason they're amazed is because Jesus is Jesus and he has the inside scoop on the nature of God. But I was thinking about all the times that, like, if you've been in a room where Jan or someone has done godly play, where the kids are invited to answer what they think about God or what they think about a situation, just as what you were just doing there, we often have this exact thing of, wow, we're amazed at their answers. And I wonder if part of this story is, like, I think that's a valid reading. The first one of the reason they're impressed is because Jesus is this great interpreter of the law, which will come through as the Gospels develop. But I wonder if also it's this sign of that, yes, from children and and the younger people, if we listen to them, we might be amazed at their answers of what they offer us as a vision of God and our way in the world with God. So that was something that was kind of coming, that, yeah, mate, it's not just it's great because it's Jesus. They're amazed. We've often been amazed at non-Jesus 12-year-olds and younger and their responses to our questions about God.
So good. Yeah, that's a really helpful way of looking at it. And it kind of speaks into this question that I know emerged earlier and it is emerging like online, where people are asking like, well, was he, like we believe as Christians that Jesus is both fully man and fully God. And I mean, to even explain that concept, we'd be doing that for the next hour and we wouldn't even touch the sides or get anywhere near an answer to it. But I think that speaks really nicely into that space, that in his full humanity as a child, he had something to offer in that place in the temple, and also he was the Son of God. And so there's this kind of two sides to that. So yeah, really, really helpful. Someone said, I like the way the story mirrors the lost sheep story. Mary and Joseph left the 99, their community, to go and find Jesus. The wonderful thing is that the lost sheep is well looked after and safe in the Father's house. And again, there's so much symbolism in this story. Jesus is at the temple. If we mirror it with that story at the end, Jesus becomes the temple in his death and resurrection on the cross. So like there's just so much going on in this space. We're gonna move on. If you've got questions or comments, please keep them coming. We'd love to hear from you. If you just joined us, we're live on Facebook, and this is Sunday Night Live. We changed the name of it because we thought Sunday night and it's live. What a great name. And we're joined by Liam and Jan. And tonight we're thinking about curiosity and learning. How do we keep alive that curiosity? Like, why do we want to learn? Whether you're a Christian or not, why do we want to open our minds to new things? So Jan's going to just sit with us for a minute, and we've got a really good question for Jan in a few moments. But it's really great to have Liam with us. Liam, you're a bit of a theological expert. I just want to frame this up because I'm doing some studies at the moment, and I've never been that good at studying or reading, to be honest. I'm dyslexic, so I've got all this kind of like all these hang-ups when I was younger, where I wasn't diagnosed and basically couldn't read and all of that stuff. But I've been on this journey, and I'm doing some study now, and I'd read this book, which was really good, called When in Romans, and I was like, yeah, that book was really great. And then I had to write a review on it about 3 weeks later, and honestly, I'd forgotten what the book was about. It completely it completely left my mind. Anyway, I Googled it. I thought someone must have written a book review. I can't read that whole book again, so I Googled it. And all of a sudden on YouTube, your face pops up speaking to the author of the bloody book that I'm trying to review. And I'm thinking, oh, right, this guy knows some people. And of course, that's not an important trait, but like, he's done well. So you're really into theology. You speak to all these theologians around the world. And what I really like is the way that you're able to speak about really difficult stuff and make it just a lot more simple for people like me to understand and then copy and write our reviews. But how did you get into this like theology stuff? Like, how did you end up like beginning this journey of theology?
Yeah. How did I get into it? Yeah, I think I've always been pretty nerdy. So we'll start there. So like whatever topic I was into or have been passionate about at different times in my life, I've then dove further in. And theology has been one of the ones that stuck the most. And I think partly because of its inexhaustible richness, partly because it's the one that I feel that the more I can wrestle with ideas and integrate them into my life, the more they actually affect the way I live in the world, and relate to others and relate to God. So I think there's reasons why it became such a level of depth. So the interviews themselves began in a similar way that, you know, we're now all exploring online in different ways because of necessity. I was working in university chaplaincy, and one of the issues we faced was people were just not around on campus very often, or if they were packing their classes in really tightly. So it was really hard to do like, you know, Bible studies or things like that. And so one of the ways we thought was, well, if we kind of have conversations online, and then when we get together to talk about them, we can jump into it a bit more, or if people have to miss weeks or can't join us for a semester, they can still engage content. And so I started reaching out to some people who wrote books that I liked, and lo and behold, many of them were very happy to talk about it, which was great. Going to drive up sales, I guess, you know, or you're just hopeful that, hey, I spent all this time, maybe some more people will be interested. So lots were very gracious in getting on board. And then from that, I was enjoying it so much that I turned it into the podcast that kept going. But yeah, it's just been a topic that inexhaustible richness. Oh, you're mute.
Sorry, mate. I really like that phrase, inexhaustible richness. I love that. Is that what the buzz is for you of theology? Because like, I know for me, like I've done a bit of theology over the last couple of years. As I read, I'm often left with more questions, right? Like I'm perhaps going to a text with questions, and then I arrive with loads more. So like, just speak into that a bit more, because I love that. I love that phrase.
Totally. I think I think maybe every field has that to an extent, but I think like conceivably, with enough time and grit, you could learn maybe everything there is to know about Victorian literature. Like, you know, like it would take a lot, and in some ways you can't. But truly theology, there's no theoretical way that you can get to the bottom. There's always more, because God is beyond the limited finite scope of our imaginations and intellect. So there's always more. And I think also there's always more in the way even about God, but also in the way humans experience, interact, think about, speak about God. And I think I have been completely, my prayer life, my concept of church, my concept of Christian community and witness and mission has been overturned and expanded and deepened again and again, because I've heard different voices and the way they have experienced God and the world. often in a great paradox where what they hear said about them by God is so different to what the world has said about them, like often in marginalized communities and things like that. So, and it's completely reshaped my thinking a bunch of different times. And I, you know, it's a joy, but it's also a thing that transforms the way I try to live in the world and live before God. So yeah, I think, you know, you just cannot get to the end. And to some extent, that's the same with scripture. Even before you pick up a second book of theology, I mean, that Lectio Divina showed, like, you know, you could do a month just thinking of every little phrase and that on that one passage, and then you know, you could start all over again. So yeah, I think that's something that appeals to me.
There's so many like avenues we could go down with this conversation. Like you're teasing us for these different things, but I was just chatting to Alex earlier. She was talking about Richard Rohr, who Jan is a big fan of. She gets his email every day. But Richard Rohr's an amazing guy. He's written lots of books about kind of spirituality, and he wrote a really good book on the Enneagram and spirituality. So Google him, have a little look at that stuff. But he was kind of highlighting. He's written some stuff on curiosity, and his kind of thing was that he was saying in the last kind of 500 years or so, we forgot to be curious about our faith, whereas like the kind of 1500 years that preceded that, between Jesus' resurrection and probably like around the time of the Reformation, people were curious because they held this kind of faith and mystery like hand in hand. So they had this belief where there was a reasonable amount of certainty, is the wrong word, but a reasonable amount of confidence. And yet there was doubt, and there were these questions, and they'd be kind of held hand in hand. And that was culturally accepted, and as people were forming theology and all of that stuff. And in the last 500 years, we've become a lot more certain, arguably a lot more black and white. We often use the term in church, like, I hold an orthodox view, orthodoxy, which literally just means like right thinking. But no one really has a true orthodoxy, right? Because no one knows. Like we don't really ever know. And so I found that a really interesting kind of contrast, that, you know, previously people could live in this space, and Chris, you know, have you noticed that? And like, what's a good anecdote to that?
Yeah, and I think there's definitely something to that. I think, you know, as the church responded to various cultural forces around it, it shows maybe potentially rigidity and boundary drawing rather than mystery and investigation and curiosity. And so I think there's definitely something there. I think, you know, it does take a bold, and, you know, it's tricky, but it does take a boldness, but I think it is a very valid pursuit to continue to hold all those things together. And I think part of maybe what comes from that, I don't know if this is exactly where you're going, but like, I think the nature of our faith is it's a translatable faith, right? The gospel is a translatable message. We never hold there's a holy language. We don't even have anything in the language that Jesus was mostly speaking. We're not reading the Bible in Greek in our churches. We are translating it, and what's more, we're often not just translating it from Greek to English, we're translating it into idioms and expressions and metaphors and illustrations for our day. And so part of that curiosity and the faith and investigating the faith is, how do I make the gospel, you know, in the sense of the good news, legible, captivating, compelling, convicting, inspiring in our day, in our place? And that's going to be different to how it was done 20 years ago, or how it's done in Slovakia. You know, it's a different thing that we explore, but it only comes by kind of diving into that mystery and thinking, what is the good news today, and how can we be expressing it in a way that captivates? And I think that's part of that. Like, but I think that comes from not being, we have to say it in exactly the same words as it was said in this particular epoch in history, you know.
Yeah, it's really good. I've got to write a really long essay over the next couple of years, and I was watching this video the other day, and they were talking about getting into the rhythm of writing, so like kind of creating space to do that, and that different people do that in different ways. But it strikes me like when I watch some of your videos and listen to your stuff, I think, like, I know you described yourself like you're a self-confessed nerd, but like, how does this guy have time to read all these books? Like, you're obviously much quicker than me at reading, but like, like, you've got 2 kids, you know, you're leading the church, which is a full-time job and some. Like, how do you create space? Or are you just really good at, like, do you just read the summary and then ask the authors some questions?
Like, sometimes yes, I'll just be I developed a decent
You heard
technique.
it here first, guys.
Yeah, there are some. I developed a decent technique to like skim a book over a couple of hours and get a decent vibe for what's going on. But and the more you know about a field, you get shortcuts. But I do try to read most of them fully through. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely harder with the young kids and like and having added a baby to the mix. Yeah, 9 weeks ago now. It's tricky. I mean, you get sometimes where you can hold one and have the book kind of held in the other hand while you read, or I'm like, crunching or rattling a rattle while I'm reading, like there's ways that you can kind of, cheat the dad thing a bit, but it is hard, and it's about finding time. But it's one of those things, if you're passionate about, it actually is like restorative, restful, enjoyable to me. I'm trying to read wider as well. Like, I've been following, reading more novels recently, and I'm enjoying that, or other kind of works from other fields. But reading is something I genuinely get joy from. And also, it sucks me away from my phone. That if I'm, I try to, if I have a book with me, then I'm also in like the doctor's office while you're waiting for an appointment or whatever waiting to pick up your tie or whatever it is you're doing. Then I'm also less likely just to spend 8 minutes doom scrolling through Twitter. So like, and I can read something, and it's slightly more edifying. So
I just jump in there.
Yeah.
I completely relate to that, and I think the like Audible's really good in that space for me. When you're driving along, rather than just listening to whatever, to listen to some of these books in like you can do 1.5 speed if you're keen. Or Matt Stanton, who I don't know if he's watching, listens at two times the speed. So he's at another level. But you can take this stuff in, and and then it starts to speak into your life, right? Like you're kind of allowing that space.
Yeah,
we're going to ask you something earlier, but I just wanted to pull Jan in at this point, because one of the things I love about you, Jan, is like I've only known you about a year, probably, when I FaceTimed you from England last year and said that I was coming to join a team and work with you. And the thing that struck me about you is just you're obviously older than me. So like you're sort of in your 40s or something, right?
Yeah, just a few years older. Yeah.
That's right. And like I know members of my family have said this, like sometimes when you get older, like you're less inclined to open your mind to new things, to be curious, to kind of create space for that. But what strikes me about you is I reckon 2 or 3 times a week you send me an article or say, have you read this? Have you seen this video? Have you seen this thing? Like, how do you keep that? Like, where does that come from? How do you keep that desire to keep learning, to keep being curious?
Yeah, look, I think it's part of it's always been wanting to, I think, grow as a person, like you, and I think realizing that there's just so much more you don't know, and I want to know more. Like I want to, I sort of just want to have sort of more understanding of things in life, I think. And I've particularly been intentional about it in the last maybe year or so to do this even sort of more as one of my so-called unforced rhythms of grace. And so just trying to learn more, to be curious more. I think one of my favorite parts is how with the wise men in Godly Play, we say that the wise men were curious because they saw a wild star. And so they went following and searching that wild star, and look what they learned and what they received and what, and that certainly stayed with me, that sort of phrase of being really curious. So,
And what an adventure, Jan. Like they didn't know.
Yeah.
Like they literally didn't know. And I'm sure along the way, they were like, oh, should we just turn around and go home? Yeah. But they didn't, right? They carried on. They didn't know what they were going to find. And then they found the savior of the world, or at least we believe that. Yeah. Thanks, Jan. Lauren's just commented, and I'd love for you to speak into this bit, Jan, as well, actually. I love that description of faith as a combination of knowing and not knowing, living with a certain degree of unknowing. To me, it seems quite a childlike posture and quite humbling to admit that we don't have all the answers, but always seeking to know and understand more. And I suppose, like, my question for you, Jan, is like, I heard someone say once, the older I get, the more uncertain I get about everything. Like, can you relate to that? Like, can you speak into that?
Yeah, I think that's so true. And you know, I just couldn't answer. You know, if a child asks me a question, I would think, well, I truly don't know the answer. I think, or I wonder about that as well. And this is what I've got to when I've wondered. But, you know, we don't know, and we have to know, we have to let there be mystery. We don't have to have a set answer for everything. And if we give a set answer, it denies our children from perhaps exploring further and wondering more.
Jan, that's really great. You just reminded me of Alpha. So like we run Alpha at HA Alpha is like kind of an opportunity to explore faith in a chilled environment. If you've never done it and you're tuning in, you've never come to church before, we're running it on Zoom. It's really easy. You can just sign in with a different name and turn the camera off. Just like join us. It's going to be a really great time. We normally have a cocktail or a glass of wine and discuss stuff. That looks a bit like it was a drinking party. It's not that at all, but we discuss stuff together. But one of the things that emerges on there is that in the first couple of weeks, people expect the host to have all the answers. So they say to me, well, you're like a priest, like you're a professional Christian. Why does God allow suffering? Why did this happen? Like, how can, what's predestination? Or, you know, that actually comes a bit later. But like, they get really frustrated when you don't answer the question. But often when we don't answer the question and create space and say, look, that question of suffering, I find that really hard. I'm curious about that. I want to learn more about that. As we go on that journey together, we see it from a different angle. We don't get the answer, and often they'll go away and have time with that question. And then it will make more sense. But they found that answer for themselves rather than being told just another kind of pat. I've learned so much from that, actually. I've learned so much from that idea of just saying, I don't know. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Liam, if someone wanted to get into the theology game, theology literally just means like the study of God or like the study of God's word. If someone wanted to just, I don't know, like someone goes to church every week and they're thinking, I'd just like to dabble a little bit in theology. I don't want to go like full bore, but what stuff would you recommend to them? Obviously, we'd recommend your podcast, which has just been helpfully shared below. So thanks for that.
I mean, there are like several really good podcasts out there, like, and some are even more like accessible, aimed for just like your entry level, or you kind of more just from the pews. Like some of my ones do still get a bit heady. You just got to pick the ones, you know, if it's 8 minutes in and you're just like, no, just try a different one. So podcasts are a good way of finding a good kind of, you know, there's some good, you know, journals, magazines, but I'll throw out 3 book ideas. There's three book ideas that I think are really good starting points, that, especially if you have a bit of an initiation into Christianity. The first, I'll put them all in the comments as well, but if people can't follow this. But the first is from Elizabeth Johnson, and it's Creation and the Cross. And one of the great things about it is she writes the whole book in a dialogue between her and a kind of semi-imagined student who's asking her questions, and she responds. But it's not just question and answer; they almost have a dialogue. And it's written. It's a great book on salvation, God's redemptive work, both in the Old Testament and the New. It has a lot of attention to the ecological crisis that we're in. A very good book to begin with there. The second is from M. Sean Copeland, a book called Knowing Christ Crucified. It's a pretty recent book, which is written particularly from the witness of African American Christians, and you know, looks at how did people who were being oppressed by Christians, oppressed by the Bible, actually claim the Bible and the faith in Jesus Christ and the liberating power of the gospel as their own, and transform that. And then she builds the right talk about discipleship and suffering and the cross, you know, in a contemporary aspect as well. Very good book, very accessible, really exciting book. And the final one I'll say is, you know, just to give a nod to Danny's Church of England roots, is Rowan Williams, Being Disciples, or Being Christian or Being Disciples. He has 2, they're 80 pages long. I think I read one of them on a 2.5 hour train trip from the Central Coast to Sydney one time. Like they're very easy to read. There's kind of 4 chapters, but there's a very good introduction into kind of basic tenets of Christian life and of being a disciple. So either those 3 are all good, but yeah, as I said, also podcasts or blogs.
Liam, thank you so much for choosing an archbishop. I'm so grateful.
You're welcome.
There's hope for the Uniting Church yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, really, really good recommendations. And yeah, Rowan Williams, just be really careful. I've written Roman Williams on the thing. Rowan Williams, R-A-W. Just be really careful with him, because if you pick the wrong one of his books, like, you're buggered basically. Like, I don't understand most of that stuff. Liam probably does, but you have to lay down after reading a couple of sentences of it. So yeah, those introductory books are really, really, really great. Sweet. I mean, we can recommend loads more resources. One book I just wanted to push out there, which, as we think about this kind of intentional life, and if you've just joined us, we've been thinking about curiosity and learning tonight in our series, The Intentional Life. There's this great book that Mike Pilavachi, who used to lead the church I was involved in from Soul Survivor, always recommends as his favorite book to young people every summer, which is The Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. What I love about that book is they've actually got a chapter on learning, which I think we'll try and post in Dive In this week. I think we're allowed to do that, that sort of size amount of the book. But it's a really good book. I've got a couple of copies of it. So if you're at church live downstairs, just go and grab one off the shelf, help yourself. Or you can borrow it. But The Celebration of Discipline goes through lots of these kind of disciplines that help us understand ourselves and understand God a bit more. And discipline sounds like quite a heavy word. We've talked about that a couple of times tonight, but that's not the point. It's putting this stuff in place in order to be more free, in order to enable us to flourish even more. So yeah, guys, thanks so much. We're nearly done for the night. I wanted to ask a question as we. Oh, you know what? Let's just do 2 cheeky ones. We started a couple of minutes late. So the first one is, I struggle with this in my kind of football life. Like, one day I think I'm the best footballer in the world, and like I'm Lionel Messi himself. And other days I think I'm the worst, and like I'm really rubbish at football. And often I don't really ever find myself in the middle. So how do we, like, to either of you, how do we strike a balance between grandiosity and like feeling completely thick when it comes to this kind of learning and study and curiosity? How do we strike that balance?
I think humility, and I think learning only increases humility if you're doing it the right way. You talk to some people who are like, clearly like smart and like, have written and read so much in a particular field, and then you ask them like a question about something just like 3 degrees to the left, and like, well, I'm not really an expert in that, so I probably can't offer much. And then, but they, obviously could, but because they have spent this, disciplined time of learning and of exploring concepts and going and seeing just how deep the depths can go on a particular topic, it gives you this great humility for like that which you do not know. And I think the more you kind of learn, the more you realize you haven't learned, and how much there is out there. And I think so kind of a pursuit of understanding things, of asking questions, of curiously following threads and following up, asking follow-up questions only will probably increase your humility and also kind of open you up to new things, to get rid of the kind of to counteract that kind of thick-headedness, but also open you to realize how big it all is, to kind of counteract that grandiosity. So I think
so good.
The pursuit itself should hopefully take care of that.
So good. And Susan wrote earlier, I didn't get a chance to read it out, I think a true expert is someone who knows they don't know it all yet. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? That humility. Jan, do you want to add anything to that? This is going to embarrass you, but you're one of the most humble people I've ever met, and just extremely gifted. I find out something new about Jan every week, and she never tells me it, right? It never comes straight from the horse's mouth. So no, that's a story for another day. But Jan, do you want to add anything to that?
Look, I agree entirely. One thing that I really focus on is this open heart full of wonder. And I think if we have that sort of way when we approach anything, is open heart, full of wonder as to what I might learn, what I might share, what I might receive or hear.
Yeah, really great. Thank you so much. So tonight we've been thinking about curiosity and learning, and Phil's just put a quote up from Rob Bell, everyone's favorite American theologian, and he says to free your mind and encourage curiosity. To free your mind and encourage curiosity. I wonder, Liam, do you want to just say any last words or anything to kind of bring it all together for tonight? I'm working you hard tonight, aren't I? Sorry, mate.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm really enjoying this. I'm sad that it's ending. I think there's one of the reasons to, if we're talking about this heart of an intentional life lived in the rhythm of Christ, and curiosity and learning are somehow part of that. The reason I think that is fundamentally the case is that we as Christians seek to live as witnesses to the world created by God as good. And within that we acknowledge true brokenness and injustice and things like that. But as a fundamental reality, we like to say our world is created by God as good. And I think the world itself, to use the phrase again, has inexhaustible richness, not only in its natural beauty, but in human creativity and culture. And I think our attention to learning, our attention to curiosity, our passion to dive in and learn more and taste more and experience more, when done well and with humility and in community, is itself a testament to this goodness of creation and the wonder of the God who gives all good things. So our curiosity and our learning, when done well, is itself a way to glorify God and enjoy God and God's good creation. I think that's how I see it as fitting within the whole.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. You've been great. Liam, do you know any blessings off the top of your head to close with? I can do an Anglican one, but I thought, seeing that you're with us today, could you give us a final blessing, and then I'll give some notices after that, because church would not be church without notices. So Jan still laughs at that for me. She's heard it about 100 times, so thanks for that, Jan. But yeah, Liam, why don't you give us a final blessing?
I'll just go with a very safe ecumenical one. May the love of God, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Why don't you just turn your cameras off and your audio? We can chat in a few moments. I'm just going to give a couple of notices. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight on Sunday Night Live. Wasn't it great to have Jan and Liam with us? I think I could have spoke to both of them for ages, and luckily I get to hang out with Jan all the time, so I'll continue that conversation with her, and I'm sure we'll get Liam back again. It's really good to have him along. Just a couple of things coming up. The next time we do Sunday Night Live, which will be approximately in about a month's time, we'd love your feedback if you want us to keep making these, by the way. We came on tonight because people were like, oh, I kind of miss it. I used to do church in my pajamas, and that was kind of fun. So we'd love to keep making more. And next month, we've got a special guest, a guy called Greg Downs from the UK, who's a lecturer at Oxford University, which is just this little uni in England. It's not that important, but we're thinking about this idea of evangelism. Now, this is a bit of a risky one to do online, and evangelism is an incredibly loaded term. But what does it mean to share our faith today? And we just need to acknowledge that people of different places and different contexts will be listening to that. And so we want to invite you to that. More information on that. And if you want to get our newsletter, go on our website on our front page, add your details. It's been updated recently. So yeah, feel free to jump on there. The other thing to say is, if you've never done an Alpha course, we don't think Alpha is the be all and end all, but Alpha is an opportunity to discuss some of the things we've been talking about tonight in a really chilled environment. And we're doing it on Zoom. And we'd love if someone could just share the event below. We'd love to invite you to that. It's super chilled. You can come along just for 1 week, and if you don't like it, it's all good. So we'd love to see you at that. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for being part of our family. Thank you for joining Sunday Night Live. We really look forward to seeing you again soon, and you'll be in our prayers at this time. And let's keep praying for the people affected by COVID-19, both in Australia and around the world, and be in solidarity as one people. Thank you so much. We'll see you all soon.